Europe's pointless temper tantrum. That's the focus of tonight's angle. All right, once again, Donald Trump and his team remind the world that the United States is the only power capable of holding the West together by protecting Europe from its own stupidity and weakness.
I have tremendous respect for both the people of Greenland and the people of Denmark, tremendous respect. But every NATO ally has an obligation to be able to defend their own territory. And the fact is, no nation or group of nations is in any position to be able to secure Greenland other than the United States.
And what have we ever really asked of NATO? For most of its history, the relationship has been lopsided. Now, that was great for the other NATO countries, but it was a lousy deal for the United States, our taxpayers. Other presidents, of course, they just let the imbalance slide, but not Trump.
I just say this. NATO has treated the United States of America very unfairly. We never asked for anything. We never got anything. We actually took care of the needs of NATO for years and years, which I felt was always unfair. So I got NATO to pay because they're rich countries.
Yeah, all told, their GDP is about on par with the United States. So why couldn't they have contributed more for their own defense, up until now at least? So, and you bet Europe is still mad about having to spend more of that money on defense. They love the old deal, but again, because of the tough love of our president, old Europe is being forced to look in the mirror. The Euro elites are so snooty, they have to put on a show of defiance to save face.
I think it's sad and totally absurd that we have an American president who's blackmailing the rest of us, trying to get a piece of land or buy it through threats. It's a new low, so to speak. We will never back down.
A new low? Now, does she think we're about to take national security advice from a socialist country that allowed itself to be a dumping ground for hundreds of thousands of radical Islamic refugees? I don't think so. So whether we're talking about Sweden or the UK or France or Canada, look, throwing fits about Greenland is just another example of fools looking at a gift horse in the mouth.
We're building a golden dome that's going to, just by its very nature, going to be defending Canada. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
But remember that Carney himself was kind of an accidental leader of Canada, and now he's just a laughingstock. Because it doesn't take a geopolitical genius to understand that a secure America means a more secure NATO.
This would not be a threat to NATO. This would greatly enhance the security of the entire alliance. We want a piece of ice for world protection, and they won't give it. They have a choice. You can say yes, and we will be very appreciative, or you can say no, and we will remember. A strong and secure America means a strong NATO.
Of course it does, and there may be an upside here. Some leaders and former leaders in Europe may realize, maybe we do have to think more of our own independence.
This is a wake-up call, a bigger one than we ever had. And I think that Europe is going to look at its strength, look at its weaknesses, do a big SWOT analysis and decide what do we need to do to be strong by ourselves, to be more independent, to rely on the internal trade that we do with each other so that we can just not ignore, but at least be prepared and have a plan B, just in case the normal relationship is not restored.
Okay, you just can't take her all that seriously, though. We found out that she walked out of a dinner when Howard Lutnick was basically making the case for America first being better for NATO and European countries, for their security. If we're stronger, they're going to be safer and stronger. She got up and walked out. They essentially canceled the dinner and said no to the dessert. So that's how mature she is. A few weeks ago, when slow-witted pundits were saying that Trump wasn't serious about Greenland, that he was just doing it to stir the pot, he was being provocative for the sake of being provocative, remember all those comments? The Angle told you that Trump is serious. and that it was only a matter of when, not if, we took de facto control of Greenland. And there were a few smart Europeans who understood what was happening. It's about protecting the Arctic.
President Trump is right. Other leaders in NATO are right. We need to defend the Arctic. We know that China and Russia are increasingly active in the Arctic. There are 8 countries bordering on the Arctic. 7 are a member of NATO. There's only one country bordering on the Arctic outside NATO, and that's Russia. And I would argue there is a 9th country, which is China, which is increasingly active in the Arctic region. So President Trump and other leaders are right. We have to do more there. We have to protect the Arctic.
And it's about respecting the country who pays the lion's share of the bills.
In terms of security, United States of America paying 65% for NATO and Europeans 35%, we have to consider what Donald Trump would like to say about the security, because he's responsible for security of the world as the leader.
Once again, I'm very proud to be half Polish. And today in Switzerland, Trump announced that a framework for Greenland was already taking shape.
Deal that people jumped at, really fantastic for the USA, gets everything we wanted, including especially real national security and international security.
How so? Can you give us some details, please?
Well, the deal is going to be put out pretty soon. I mean, we'll see. It's right now a little bit in progress, but pretty far along. It gets us everything we needed to get.
The president tapped J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to lead those negotiations. So look, when this is over, we will have clarified the ownership of Greenland in a way that's going to redound to our safety and thus the safety of the West. So preventing hostile powers from shooting missiles over Greenland to target the United States or our military assets, this is an urgent priority. And frankly, it should have been addressed decades ago by American presidents. And long before Trump came into office, he understood that pleading with Europe to do the right thing with China, with military spending, with trade, pleading with Europe accomplishes zero. You need to exercise leverage, which is exactly what he did with the Greenland issue. Remember, no options were taken off the table, and a tariff hike was floated. So Europe then huffed and puffed and reacted, fulminating with outrage, dire predictions. And of course, at the end, the Europeans are coming to the table. And this is why California Governor Gavin Newsom was so upset yesterday, and why he begged Europe to fight Trump harder, because he even saw that this was going to be a big win for Trump and a big win for America, and he knew the Europeans would cave and negotiate some deal with Trump. So rule of thumb, the American left never takes the side of the American people in a situation such as this. So it's embarrassing, really, that after watching this man, Donald Trump, for over a decade, that so many supposed experts still don't understand how President Trump operates. They still don't get it. So anyone who predicted that Donald Trump would destroy NATO, Donald Trump's going to crash the dollar, he's going to leave us more vulnerable than under Biden, they should never, and I mean never, work in political commentary again. Because 1 year into this Trump presidency, America is safer, America is stronger, America is richer, America is freer than we were under President Otto Penn, under President Obama, and yes, under President George W. Bush. Bottom line, it is not possible for any U.S. president to make things better for us here at home without standing up to the rest of the world when our interests collide with theirs. So Trump's predecessors, they were too worried about offending the global community and not worried enough about fighting for us. And that's the angle.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.